this session is on how to accomplish in D8 what you used to do in D7. So basically, the audience is site builders as well as developers who have been using Drupal 7. Maybe even new people in Drupal 8. That way, they get started on the right foot. They learn the right way of doing things. Now, obviously, I don't mean that everything I'm telling you is the right way. But in my opinion, I have tried other ways, and this is the best that I know as of now. I'm sure my knowledge will evolve, and so that's what we are here to talk about. We will talk about some user-facing stuff, not a whole lot, because user-facing is not that much really. Then we will talk about obviously site builder changes, things that have changed for site builders, and then finally for developers, what changes for developers. We will talk about how. Let me get to the agenda in a second. So there it is. Oh, first of all, by the way, I'm Jitesh Doshi, and a little bit more about me and my company will come up shortly. On Twitter, I am @spinspire_com, and we will talk about that in a second. So motivation, or the why should you want to listen or attend. So you're a D7 practitioner who is starting out with D8. Things have changed in D8 quite a bit, as you probably have noticed. The D8 is a much bigger change than D7 was from D6. And so let's learn a few tricks very quickly, hopefully. Agenda, what's different? So we'll compare those things. How to set up your new D8 project. It's very different from how you did things in D7. So you want to, in D7 you did rush DL or whatever, download Drupal and go from there. But in D8, it's different. New modules and possibly replacements of old modules, and that you should know, the go-to modules in D8. How does configuration management change, which is very important for site builders and developers. The API changes and coding approach changes, how you code custom modules is very different. And finally, if you are doing any kind of migration from other places to Drupal, then Drupal 8 that is, then you should learn the migrate module. Earlier in D7, migrate was exclusively the domain of developers only. No site builders need apply, right? But in D8, you will see that there is almost all migration is done. 90% of it is done with just configuration. So a little bit about Spinspire, bunch of smiling people, right? This is not stock footage. This is actually people that work for Spinspire. So we are a Drupal-focused company. You might call it a Drupal shop. We are a development shop, and we are all located in Jacksonville, Florida, a mere 6-7 hour drive from here. And we have contributed modules to Drupal community, and these are full projects, high-level projects, contributed projects. So popular tags, for which we did D7 earlier, and recently we released D8, and PRLP, which is password reset landing page, and that has been D6, D7, and D8 for a while. So, and some sample clients: Nike, Florida Blue, federal government. In fact, I walked into a federal government project just recently and saw that they were using PRLP, and felt good when the client is already using it before they know you. Then you walk in, so it's nice. And you can learn more about us at spinspire.com. That was the message from our sponsors. Now let's get to the actual content of the presentation. So let's talk about the changes that have happened. On the user-facing side, again, a lot of the stuff has changed under the cover, so users may not see a whole lot of difference. But all the core themes are responsive, so which means they can I mean, in D7, there you had to get a specific responsively designed theme to, but in D8, you can pretty much assume that, well, of course, all core are responsive, but even contrib more or less are responsive. So that's good. We also have responsive images. Now, again, a user may not even realize that they are getting responsive images, because that's the whole point of responsive images, to adapt to your device without asking you, without sending you to mobile.mysite.com, right? But that will change the user experience because it will be faster. And what is responsive images? You might think that, oh, the image scales itself on various devices. That's responsive. That's responsive layout, but the image itself is not responsive because you could be downloading a 1920 by 1080p image, even on a mobile, small little screen or much less resolution screen, and that wouldn't be very helpful, right? I mean, that will scale itself, yes. You can shrink it. But responsive images really is that download a lower resolution image. And that means lower bandwidth, better, faster download, I guess. Page refresh is faster. So another user-facing thing. Again, users don't notice these things, which is BigPipe. BigPipe renders the page progressively, which improves the user's experienced time. Like the time to the first byte, of course, is lower, and then the page seems to render faster, although it's not fully rendered yet. So BigPipe, all you have to do is click a button, turn it on, and it gets progressively rendered. Another user-facing thing is Wysiwyg editor, CK editor, specifically in core. You remember how we used to have to install the Wysiwyg module in D7 and then plug in TinyMCE or CK or one of those. You don't have to do that anymore. It's all in there. And it is user-facing, especially if, when it comes to comments, right? Users are entering comments using these editors. And let's just skip over this quickly. The final thing is that the node edit form is now, it has its own layout. And in the last presentation, somebody was talking about node edit form being very poor user experience. It has improved, I would say, quite a bit. It's now 2-column. Now, these are the user-facing things. Once again, like I said, these are not earth-shattering changes from the user's viewpoint, because most of the real changes are behind the scenes. So let's talk about those. Site builder-facing changes. Those are going to be, what has changed for the site builder. Once again, I'm talking about big ones. So configuration management system. Now, this is the big one. This is probably the biggest, I would say, for site builders, because now you don't have to package things as features, and features works for some things but not for other things. And yet, not only it doesn't work for everything, more importantly, I have been on projects where I deployed a feature, and even upon reverting the feature, I didn't get everything that I expected. The feature and the site go slightly out of sync from each other, and then gets very, very crazy. So features was working about 80–90% of the time, but then the remaining 10–20% difference is what matters, and it was very, very painful. Now in Drupal 8, of course, if you have used it at all, you probably know that all configuration is managed by Drupal itself, meaning to say the schema of the configuration, storage of it, and all that. Therefore, Drupal can actually export that configuration to flat files, and specifically YAML files. And once you have all your configuration exportable to text files, or in this case YAML files, you can not only export it and then take it to another environment, from dev to stage, from stage to production, and so on and so forth. That's one thing, that's great. But you can also version control it. You can commit it to Git, and that, of course, is a great thing. There are modules like config split. Sometimes people run into the problem, hey, what about the situations where my configuration is slightly different between dev and stage and production? Well, there are modules for that, like config split, which allow you to separate that part, and maybe you don't commit it to your Git, or maybe you put stuff in a special branch, and so on and so forth. So you can use those. So configuration management, in my opinion, is probably from a site builder perspective the most important reason to go to 8. There are some others. I'll mention those. Migrate. Second one is migrate is in core. So by the way, has anybody has everybody can you raise your hand if you have used Drush CEX or Drush CIM, like export and import of configuration in D8? Very few, couple of hands only. Okay, all right. In that case, I should explain a little bit more. I'll show a demo in a second. Then you'll know what that is. But okay, now next one is we have very little. I think we are slightly behind on time. We started a bit late too. So let me check. Oh boy, we are already at 3:47. Okay, that's 17 minutes in. Okay, then we have migrate in core. Now, migrate is a module that was contrib. Migrate Drupal to Drupal, D to D was there also. With Drupal 8, we have migrate in core. But I don't know, for better or for worse, all the migrate modules that you can practically use are still in contrib. So in core, there is migrate, and then migrate Drupal, and migrate Drupal UI. Okay. Let me save that for later because I'm getting ahead of myself. But in any case, we have migrate in core. The gist is that you still have to download other contrib modules to do the migration. Views in core, great. So the great thing from that, not only that now you don't have to download views, but more importantly, all the things that used to be listings of various things in core are now views, which means the content management page, the admin/content in D7, customizing it was very difficult. But in D8, it's a view. So go in there, edit the view, add your fields that you want, add whatever bulk operations you want, change the presentation, export to Excel if you want, so on and so forth. All those things are immediately accessible to you and that is just one example, content management page. Almost everything else that you will see, anything that used to be a listing, like taxonomy, pages, and everything. Okay, yeah. So all those are also views. So that's good. That's the real benefit of views in core. Layouts are in core. This is a slightly less exploited feature of Drupal 8 it's been 2 years since Drupal 8 was released, and I've seen a lot of people are not yet using layouts, and they could be using layouts. So there is something called layout manager. I forget. I think it's in core. I don't remember. But anyway, you basically your custom modules, your theme, as well as any contrib module can contribute layouts. Layouts are what? Like, here's my 2 columns stacked. Here's my 1 column, and here's my brick layout. All those layouts, they are now. The layouts themselves are not in core, but the layout management API is in core, which means anybody can contribute. Any module or theme can add their own list of layouts, and then you can use those layouts using display suite, panels, and a few other modules that that exploit the layouts. So that's a good thing. And then everything is an entity. This is something that impacts developers even more than users, and site builders. But this is good. Everything is an entity. Blocks are entities, which means you can add fields. You can create your own block types, which means a new bundle. Is everybody familiar with what a bundle is? Right. So a bundle is basically, for nodes, it's the content type. For taxonomy, it's the vocabulary. Similarly, now blocks have a bundle, have a block type, they call it. And that means you can have different categories of different styles of blocks that have their own list of custom fields, and another one with its own list of custom fields, and so on and so forth. And then you can place them. And the block placement UI is much better now. You can place a block on a page more than once. So I've never tried to place it within the same region twice, but I have placed it in different regions, and it's nice. So the blocks can be placed. So those are some of the things. This is obviously not an exhaustive list, but I think this is a start. Now, developer facing. How many of you are developers? Cool. So at least half, more than half. That's good, because your life has completely changed if you went from D7 to D8. Because so here are some of the highlights of how your life has changed. You used to write procedural PHP. Now you have to write object-oriented PHP. Symfony is everywhere. Although you may not even realize that you're using Symfony, but most of the APIs are influenced by Symfony. Symfony, of course, is in core. It's an outside framework that Drupal is built on top of now. So that's there. By the way, this presentation I'll attach the presentation to my the page, the session page. Okay. And in Drupal 7, you used to do everything was through a hook. That was the only entry point ever, right? But in Drupal 8, there are lots of other alternatives, lots of other entry points. You are still using hooks, yes. They are not gone, but there are much fewer hooks in Drupal 8 than in Drupal 7, in the sense that a lot of things that used to be done through hooks is now done through plugins and services. So what are plugins and services? Hooks, I'm assuming you already know, right? Hook underscore foobar, you rename the word hook with the machine name of a module, underscore foobar remains whatever it was, and the argument list remains whatever it was. And then you implement it, your module gets called at that predefined point in the workflow. That's good, that's hooks. Plugins, if you have ever written a block in Drupal 7, then you realize you have to implement hook block info, hook block view, hook block configure, hook block insert, hook block delete. So what is that? That's a family of hooks, of related hooks. Everything, they are different hooks dealing with different aspects of the same thing, which is a block, right? In Drupal 8, they have replaced that with plugins. They said, if you have several hooks related to the same component, I guess, like a block, why are you implementing 5, 6 different hooks? Why not just implement one plugin, which is an interface? I'm assuming everybody has done some object-oriented programming. So blocks they are specified as interfaces with more than one method, basically. That's the whole point of it. So you will have you'll have one block plugin with 5 or 6 interface methods. You will implement that interface in your class. That's your plugin implementation. And then there is a plugin manager, the block plugin manager in this case, which will take your block implementation and make it available to various modules as well as to the UI and all the other places. Sorry, that's the shortest description I can give of plugins, and yet I am pretty sure that it's not sufficient. So in general, you can say plugins are discoverable interface implementations. So the API defines, here's an interface for blocks. Here's an interface for entities, or so on and so forth. Somebody defines an interface, you implement that interface, just like somebody defines a hook and you implement the hook. And then you annotate it with @ those documentation comments, and that's what makes it discoverable. You basically say, my block has this ID. My plugin has this ID, and that's how the block plugin manager finds your block and makes it available somewhere in the UI. So I know that's not enough, but it's a start. Services are similar, except that while you can have one block interface and many implementations of it active concurrently at the same time, services are similar, but you can have only one implementation of that service in the system. So both plugins and services are basically container managed components. Okay, but services, they are singletons. You have one implement. So you would implement a service like for caching. the default built-in is database caching, and then there is memcache you could have. So you basically plug out, you replace the database implementation with memcache implementation. So that's what services are. You can look at, if you are interested, you should go and look at /core/services.yaml, or find the services.yaml that is in core, and that lists every service that comes with core. And then, of course, you override it using your own services.yaml, which you keep in your site's default or whatever site directory. Again, I know it's not enough, but we have only 40 minutes total, and now even less. Theming, well, we used to use PHP template. tpl.php is the extension we used to use. Now it's Twig templates. So you say your templates are named something.html.twig. And that's a whole presentation by itself, many presentations, I would say, to learn Twig. But the main improvement from a developer's perspective is that Twig is presentation only, minus the logic. So in PHP template, people used to write a whole bunch of code to do all kinds of manipulations. Even you could dip into the database if you really wanted to. Again, those are all anti-patterns, bad practices. You're not supposed to do those things. Twig puts an end to it. It simply says you can only put minimal logic, kind of conditional stuff here and there, and everything else is just presentation. But just one thing that that you should know, that if you have complicated logic in Twig, you can put that in macros. So Twig has macros. And that's all I will say about it, because macros is yet another presentation. Another thing is, in D7, you could add a JS or CSS file to the page as and when you wanted. You just add that to your .info file, or you add it programmatically using Drupal add JS or Drupal add CSS, and that was it, right? So in Drupal 8, they have formalized that a little bit. They said, whenever you have these assets that you want to inject into a page, bundle them into a library. And so you're not allowed to just directly inject a CSS or JS into a page. You put it in your CSS or JS directory, yes, but then you have mymodule.libraries.yaml, and that libraries YAML declares the library name by its name, which is within your module. And then you say, OK, these are the CSS and JS files that are part of the library. And then you, instead of doing Drupal add JS, you say Drupal add library. Or again, in the info file, you identify the library, not the CSS and JS. I know there's a lot to cover. This is probably, I mean, we are not doing any kind of justice to the actual topic. But my job here is to simply tell you what's out there. I don't think in this given time I can teach you everything. I can only tell you, OK, these are the things you should look more into. All right, so in D7, everything had to be done with code. There were a few things that we were doing directly with configuration, views, of course, some rules and those kinds of things, yes. But still, we did have to write a lot of code. In D8, you still write some code, but a lot of functionality has moved into YAML configuration. Now, you may say that, well, YAML is still code, isn't it? You still have to write it in a text editor, not in some nice web-based UI. So, and I would agree with that. But still, YAML is simpler. It's declarative. There's fewer, in any declarative system, there are fewer surprises because it's rule-based. You know, you're just declaring stuff. While in a programming language like PHP, there's no constraints whatsoever. You could write anything, which means you could cause a lot of trouble too. So, but still, I like this about D8, that a lot of things can be done with just configuration. Sorry, it's coming back. Yeah. OK, and the other thing is, for a developer, if you have been a good D7 developer, then you should be splitting your module into a lot of include files, right? I know a lot of us haven't done that, myself included. Sometimes my .module file is 700 lines long. which is not a good thing, and it contains stuff other than hooks, right, which is again a bad thing. So the right way to do that would be to split your non-hooks out of your .module file into .inc files, and then load those inc files as needed using module load include, right? That's the right way to do things. This is what I like about D8. It makes the right thing also the easy thing, right? Which is, there is no more, you don't have to split your stuff into include files, .inc files. Because it is object oriented, every class lives in its own .php file. If you have a class called foo, it lives in foo.php. If you have another class called bar, it lives in bar.php, right? So as a result, it has modularized your PHP files automatically, split your PHP files in, and you never have to say, I want to physically load this .php file. You simply specify that in your use statement up at the top. You say, I use this bar or foo class, and the rest of it, loading the file in question, is done automatically by the autoloader. So you specify namespaces for all your code, and you and whatever code is using it does issues a use statement, use, and then the fully qualified name of your class, and that's it. Autoloader will find your class. It will also find it within whatever particular module your code lives in, and then so Drupal autoloader is pretty intelligent. It finds your module, it finds the code within the module, so that's good. So these are the things that change your life as a developer, but I think it makes your life easier. One thing that I did notice first time when I got into Drupal 8 was like, man, so many files, lots and lots of files, and I was annoyed at it. Initially, I thought, man, I used to do this all in one place, .module file, and now I have to create 17 different files for these things. After a while, I realized that it's for the better. I should have been splitting my files in the first place, but I was not forced to. Now I'm forced to. So as a result, your files are more numerous but smaller. Average size is smaller. So the system is forcing you to do better modularization, I guess. Okay, so let's get into more practical concerns of developers, like Drush. Drush is still there. You do have to use Drush 8 with Drupal 8. You cannot use 5 or 6. 7 you could at one point, but now it's Drush 8 for everything. Okay, so use Drush 8. It's still there. It's as useful as it ever was, if not more, because of the new features of Drupal 8. But then Drupal console is trying to supplant. It does almost everything that Drush does, but then it also adds one unique feature, which is it does a lot of code generation. So Drupal console makes your life easier by you say, hey, I want to generate a plugin. I want to create a plugin. It will ask you the name of the plugin and the module that it goes into and a few other things, a lot of questions, and then it'll generate the code, which, as a purist, at first I said, no, real men write their own code. You don't do this. But then I realized the code that it was generating was much better quality than what I was writing. So I said, okay, well, I give up. So I basically started using it because it does a better job. It has its own templates. It's generating code based on templates, but those templates are thoroughly vetted by veterans who know what they're doing. And so therefore, it will generate code that is better quality. It takes care of a lot of concerns. So I would recommend that you use Drupal console for generating your plugins and your blocks and your entities. Some of this stuff is really esoteric. You cannot remember these things. But because the code generator will just generate everything, it becomes easier. Number 3, Composure. Composure, one second. Sorry. So Composer, you are supposed to use, earlier we used to just do drush DL for everything, and that's it. Now, what time do we have? How much time do we have? Four, okay, yeah, so we still have 15 minutes, I think. So you're not supposed to use drush DL and just download whatever you want. Some of the better, more knowledgeable people used to use drush make. Drush make would, your make file would download all your dependencies and you run drush make file. None of that is necessary because you are supposed to use Composer. How many have not used Composer? Never used Composer. Okay, only a couple. So basically, Composer is the package manager, just like NPM is for Node, and I guess what's that? Maven sort of is for Java. So similarly, Composer is the package manager and a dependency manager for PHP, and it will download all the dependencies. You have to write a composer.json file. Not to worry, Drupal comes with a built-in composer.json, so it's a starting point. And you can add more requirements. You don't even have to edit the composer.json. You simply say composer space require some repository / some project. So you could say composer require Drupal / devel. And it'll not only download devel, it'll add it to your composer.json, also download all the dependencies of devel. And so you could say composer space require space Drupal / path auto. And when you do that, it'll also download token because path auto depends on token. So Composer is good in that sense. And now you can commit only composer.json file, and there is another file composer.lock as well. You commit those two files. You now do not have to commit all the source code of all your contrib modules, etc. So which goes into a vendor directory. You don't have to commit that. By the way, everything I'm saying, you will probably get that out of the box if you use the approach for starting your project that I'm about to show. And then, so configuration is exportable and therefore versionable, that you can see. I'll show you again. And then, yes, config defaults in code. So what does that mean? If you have done D7 programming, you would say variable _ get. That's how you were getting configuration settings, right? Variable _ get, and then some variable name, comma, you would give a fallback value. Second argument, second parameter would always be, in case you don't find this setting, then here's my hard-coded default, right? You don't have to do that anymore. In fact, I really like this feature. If you include a .yaml file in your modules /config directory / install directory, so if you have whatever YAML files you have in there, those are configuration settings that will get imported into your Drupal instance automatically, which means when you issue the configuration load command to get a configuration item, so config arrow get, when you try to get it, you don't have to specify a hard-coded default because the default is always there. You specified the defaults in this YAML file. So that's something very nice. And also the configuration can be very hierarchical because it's a YAML file. You can have nesting levels. So it's very, very nice in that respect. I really hope I get to the demo part of this, but we'll see. Okay, so how do you start? So now we are getting into something practical that you can do. How should you start your Drupal project? In Drupal 7, you used to do drush DL Drupal, right? You can still do that, but I would not recommend it. The right way, in my opinion, would be, sorry, let me just show very quickly if I can. Okay, so the right way I would say would be you issue this create project command. Yes, so this, as you can see, Composer, which is already installed on can you see it? Let me see if I can make the font bigger. Oops, what's happening? How do I make it larger? Control plus. No, I'm sorry, I don't know how to make the font larger. What did I just do? Oh, yeah, that's bigger font. Yes, I'm going to do that in a second. Okay. Yeah, so let me make the window fit the size. No, maximize is what the problem is. Yeah, so 1 second. Is that better? If only. Okay, yes. So here's the command: Composer create project, Drupal-composer/Drupal-project, and then the version number. I don't think it's absolutely needed. So if you search for this Drupal, just search for. By the way, the slide deck includes a link to this. So this hyperlink takes you to the page which instructs you how to do it. And so it says, create the project. It's sort of like git clone, but better. It will git clone this, and then it will also download all the dependencies and run the scripts that are needed, etc. So, and then you can. So you're creating this composer. You're copying from this page, and then this project, and you make a copy of it. Let's say call this ATL demo. Okay, ATL demo. And then you say stability dev, which means I'm not married to stable only. I can work with the experimental stuff, and then no interaction. And then there was one more thing: prefer dist. Try to get the distribution zip files rather than from git clone. So if I issue this command, it's going to create a folder called ATL-demo, and it's going to download that project in here. So we will see 1 second. Ooh, what just happened? Ooh, what the heck? Sorry, I shouldn't have messed with it. I'm trying to resize this, and it's doing something, but I cannot see it. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. All right. So it's basically downloading everything. What it's doing is it cloned that project, and then it ran Composer install within the project, and now it's downloading all the dependencies. So this, I would say, is the right way to start your project, because it will and be ready for a different looking layout of your project directory. So that's my second bullet. Project root is not your web root. In Drupal 7, wherever you download Drupal, that contains index.php, right, which is your web root, your doc root, your Drupal root. They're all one and the same. In Drupal 8, if you use the right approach, your project root, the place that you would start your git commit from, right, is not your web root. You will actually have a subdirectory called web or doc root or something like that. And that's what contains index.php. And that's what you should point Apache or Nginx to. Okay, so that's your doc root. And because outside the doc root, the project contains things like the vendor folder. The vendor folder is where you have your downloaded stuff, non-Drupal downloaded stuff, right? Libraries that are not Drupal modules or themes, etc. Drupal modules and themes, they still live inside the Drupal's doc root, the web directory, okay, under /module/custom or /module/contrib and so on and so forth. And then, so once you've downloaded this, I don't know if it has, yeah, so it's finished. So if I go to ATL demo, this is what I'm talking about. That's your Drupal root. And then this is other stuff that is non-Drupal but PHP libraries. And so if I cd to web, that's your Drupal root. And this will be more familiar to you because it contains index.php and other stuff. All core resides in here, in the core directory, and sites, of course, where they are. But earlier we used to, all the shared modules we used to put in sites all blah, 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 right? You're supposed to put them directly here in modules and themes and profiles, okay? So this is your sites all, you can think of it that way, and download stuff. And even the custom stuff can go here. You can still put things in site-specific directory, yes, but there's no sites all anymore. This is your sites all, okay? The other thing is, yes, so configuration. I wanted to show you configuration. So let me show you that. So if I'm going to get into my tmux session. If I do drush cex, this is what I was telling you. So I just switched very quickly into a session where I was doing some Drupal development for another site. And this is what I want to show you, drush cex. And so the entire configuration of the site is now exported to site's default files config with a very long, strange name. That's basically to protect it from somebody just downloading your configuration. So if I now list it, let me go on. So if I go to web, sites, default, files, config, blah, 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 sync. This is the configuration of that entire site, the complete configuration of the site. As you can see, lots of files, right? These are all the YAML files. So if you copy this, if you copy these YAML files to another environment, let's say they do require them to have the same site UUID, which is easy to override actually. But you basically go to another environment, import these YAMLs with drush cim, which is the config import. If you import these back into the site, your new site has the exact same configuration as the original site. It still has its own content, yes, but not its own config. Its config has been overridden by the whatever you imported. So that makes it very easy. So now you may say, hey, but what about unusual cases where the distinction between config and content is not very clear? Well, now it's very clear because anything that is exported with this drush cex is configuration. Sorry, but so it's up to the designer of the module to decide, is this config or content? If they choose the Drupal config API, then it's config. If they use the entity API, then it's content. Simple. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to show you how to import it, but I'm sure you'll learn that. That's not a big problem. So you then install Drupal. You should split your settings.php into settings.local.php and the original, which many of us have been doing in D7. But now in D8, again, it encourages the right thing. It makes it very easy. It's right there in settings.php. Uncomment this, and then you uncomment it, and now you're loading local configuration on top of the committed configuration. Sorry, settings, I meant, not configuration. You should also use developer.services.yaml, which is basically a kind of an override on top of the base services YAML. You put developer on top of it, which allows you to do some development settings without changing the base services YAML. Again, look at example.settings.local.php, which is in your sites directory. Look at that file, and you will know what I mean. It makes it very easy. Okay. All right. So you do all those things. You download stuff. And then finally you do git commit of the entire project root. It will automatically git ignore your vendor folder and your settings.php and a few other things. So that's good. So it takes care of those things. And so these are some essential commands that you might, this is just scratching the surface. You might want to Composure require, this is how you download stuff and add. This is the first command, shows you how to download multiple dependencies, add them to your Composure JSON and to your vendor directory, etc., your modules directory. Then you can, now that you have done this, you can now run Drush like this. Unlike in D7, we used to have to install Drush outside somewhere in user local bin or someplace. You don't have to do that. This can become part of your project root. And then Drupal console can also be added using the first command and then used with this command from your project root. And then you can add modules. The fourth bullet point is showing how to add modules. This will end up in your project root / web / modules / contrib automatically, not in vendor. Okay. This is how you add a module. Then next one is how you enable. This is the same as Drupal 7. Enabling the module is exactly same. One thing is, it's not possible to disable a module. Haha. You can only uninstall it. That I still do not know. I mean, basically what they're saying is it's up to a module designer himself or herself to decide what disabling means. So they're saying we can only help you uninstall it. So there are situations when I want to just disable a module rather than uninstall it. That's not an option anymore. The module creator must give me a checkbox somewhere saying disable your functionality. So I haven't found a real solution to that problem yet. So you enable it like this. You disable it. You don't disable it. You do pm-uninstall or pmu to uninstall it. You're adding another module here, but in this case, Path Auto will also download tokens, and so dependencies come along with it. You don't have to download them separately, and then you enabled. So these are the things you would probably do at the very beginning of starting a site. Let's keep going. Okay, whew. I am very bad at timing these things, so I don't think I will be able to demo any of this because this is where the good stuff starts. Okay, I'll just rush through it. Simple. Go watch a video on paragraphs. It's amazing. It gives basically structure to your body. Earlier, people would tell their business users, their content editors, to, okay, here's an HTML snippet, copy and paste it into your body, and they do that. And then if they ever touch it slightly, it breaks. You don't have, so paragraphs. By the way, there was a presentation on paragraphs just before this. So if you have attended that, then you already know this. But paragraphs gives you structured data, structured bodies where everything is, you can say, this is a slideshow paragraph. This is an accordion paragraph, and so on and so forth. And now your users are editing structured content as opposed to one big blob of HTML. And that way, they cannot make mistakes. It's less likely. It's much harder to make mistakes. So that's what paragraphs is. The real power of paragraphs, of course, comes when they get rendered. The layout is superlative, I guess is the word. No demo. Demo ... Sorry, no. Web form in D8 is like complete rewrite. Again, Jacob Rakowitz had a training this morning on that, the author of the module himself. And again, I'm very impressed with what they've done. So go check out web forms in D8. You'll like it. Media. So this is something that you could do wrong very easily because out of the box, files, D8 still gives you files, just like D7 did. But you shouldn't be using that as in at least 50% of the cases, it's not right. You should be using media entities because that's basically a different level of abstraction on top of files. Although files themselves are fieldable entities, but I would recommend media. Or don't forget embed. Embed is a great module where you can embed videos and tweets and whatnot inside in the middle of your HTML body content. And it remains structured. It's getting pulled from its original site, whether it's YouTube or Twitter. That's very nice. So it almost feels like an iframe embedded inside your HTML, but it's not. It's not an iframe. It's a part of your content yet. So So yeah, so that's embed. Again, there is embed entity, embed Twitter, embed URL, embed video, and embed YouTube, embed this, embed that. So many things. So you should check them out. Migration. So again, we are over time really, but I just want to finish this. Like I said, in Drupal 7, migration was possible but very difficult. In D8, it's in core. But like I said, these core modules, migrate Drupal, and migrate Drupal UI. I didn't find them as, like, obviously migrate is a foundation of everything else, but in and of itself, they are not that useful, because migrate Drupal will do the migration from one Drupal version to another, this one. And it does that automatically. That's good. But it asks you no questions whatsoever. That's a big problem. I want to control my migration. I want to do it in steps. I want to tweak it just a bit. And it doesn't ask you any questions. Just, here's your Drupal 7 site. Let's make it Drupal 8. No questions asked. That's not how real world operates. So that's why you need the contrib modules, where you will use migrate plus, migrate tools, and migrate upgrade, these three. Migrate upgrade is what you will use when you want to go from D6 or D7 to D8, and you want to have some control over the process. Migrate tools gives you drush commands to control the process, right? And then migrate plus is a toolbox of various migration plugins and a lot of good functionality, excellent functionality. And then finally, there are other contrib modules like migrate source CSV and migrate spreadsheets, which, as the name suggests, let you import data from CSV files and spreadsheets. Now, a migration YAML file. So how to write a migration YAML file? You can find this again. If you click that link, you will be able to see this is the official documentation, and right in there is a migration YAML example, pretty extensive example. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go over it, but it's pretty straightforward. It's a bit tricky. It does take a week to learn the migration ins and outs of migration, but fortunately, by now there is plenty of examples on the internet. You can just Google for, Drupal CSV import of taxonomy terms, and boom, you will find the right sources there. Okay, all right. So wait, what happened here? Okay. All right, then. Okay, I think we are out of time, so I will conclude it here. Any questions? We do have, we don't have another presentation coming up after this, so we can take our time. Questions? Yeah.
Do you have any issues with importing blocks? I don't know if that's been solved yet, but I've had some substantial problems with importing blocks in Drupal.
Yep. So the question was, have I faced any issues importing blocks? And the answer is yes, very much so. And the reason for that, what he means is that you basically export the block configuration from one copy, or let's say dev environment, and then you go to stage or production, and you import that back, just like I showed you drush CEX and drush CIM. You import it back, and it seems to work, but it doesn't work. In the new place, so the reason why you have that problem is because block is two things. Block is configuration and content, which is entity. Block itself, the actual body, the stuff, the text that you, or the image or whatever you typed into the block is an entity. It is not config. It's entity. It's content, therefore, right? But the placement of the block, under what circumstances it should show up. So all the block configuration in the config form is configuration. So this block ID should show up on these pages, in this region, etc. All that information is config. But the actual content of the block is content. It's an entity. So when you exported the block, you exported the config part of it. You went to another place and you imported that. Great. So if you go into the block placement UI, you will see that, oh yeah, this block is placed here. But then you'll see that when you actually render it, let's say you put a site block on your front page, it'll say broken, like there'll be a message saying this block was not found or missing entity or something like that. That's because you exported and imported the config, not the entity. Now, solution. What is the solution? That's a tough one. The manual solution is to create that block manually, again, which of course defeats the purpose of exporting, importing. Yes, I know that. But you could do this. You could create the block manually. Don't place it, only create it. Okay? And then figure out its UUID. Copy the UUID of that block, go into your config files, paste it into that config file, and then import it. Now it will be placed correctly. That's not much of a solution, really. All right, I understand that.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
So anyone's looked at that.
Correct. So that's not really a good solution, but it's something. The right solution would be to have that config stuff fine, and then also have a migration. And you can migrate. That's the good thing. You can write a migration YAML, which sources the block from your lower environment, recreates it and it will maintain the same UUID, by the way, right? So here's another reason why even if you are not a site migration specialist, you still might end up learning migration, because A, it's easier than it used to be, and B, it's much more widespread, and there are all these use cases which are not migrations per se, and yet you have to use them. So that's probably one way to do it. There are also other modules like deploy. I have not used deploy, I will admit. But deploy, I think, tries to solve that problem.
Someone actually tried, right? There is a module out there that claims to solve the issue, but it doesn't.
Yeah. I also researched that. I didn't find a solution. I did the manual way first, and then eventually I plan to do the migration approach. I know enough about migration to try it. I just haven't tried it yet. Any other questions? One question I have for you is, does this make you more likely to try out Drupal 8? And well, you have already tried out for sure, but I hope, yeah. What is that?
To keep using it.
Yeah, to keep using it. Yes. I must admit that I had a lot of fear of Drupal 8 initially. I mean, it was released in November of 2015. That's, exactly 2 years almost, right? So initially, it was too much change for me. I'm basically telling you that 5 stages of what is it called? Grieving. Yeah. So that's what denial and this and that. I went through all those stages, and I'm at the acceptance stage, and I'm in fact enjoying it. So I have to tell you that yes, initially it will be scary. I was pretty scared because too much change at once. But trust me, at the end of it, there is a lot of gain. Lot of pain is in this case at least leads to a lot of gain too. And I really like the way things are done now in Drupal 8. In fact, I find it very. I was at a point almost thinking about, should I go to backdrop or stay with D7 and so on and so forth. But I think I got through it, pushed through it, and I think it was a good decision. There are a lot of new ways. Drupal 8 promotes new ways of thinking. Oh, one of the things that it was in one of the bullets that I didn't mention. Everything is a RESTful service. Every entity in your system is exposed as a RESTful service. I didn't even mention it because it's probably one of the greatest things about Drupal 8. So we did have a RESTful export, REST. What was it called? There was a module, I forget, in D7, but it would do a few entities. And if you go to Drupal 8 and turn on I'm sorry, I cannot show it. But anyway, if you turn on the REST module and go enable and look at the list and also enable REST_UI module, if you look at the list of RESTful services that it exposes, is quite impressive, because everything, blocks are exposed, something that you wouldn't think. Configuration is exposed, and of course nodes and terms are. That goes without saying, but even much more than that is exposed. Content types, every content type, manage fields and everything, all the fields are exposed as a RESTful service. So tomorrow, I am presenting React.js, a rich web application with D8 and React.js, which will make use of the RESTful services and that are exposed in D8. So, and one of the major aspects is how do you authenticate yourself? And that will be discussed. So yes, authentication is exposed as a RESTful service. So
yeah. What would you say your work with your clients? What takes up the most time? What are you working with mostly? D8 or D7 or something else?
We are almost all of our projects are, every new project, not almost, without exception, all new projects are D8. We do have some maintenance and support. We are supporting some and doing general maintenance enhancements to D7 as well. But by now, everything new is D8. Yeah, nobody's starting a D7 project, that's for sure. And we are spending 75% of our time on D8.
Have you migrated all these D8 sites from something else, or if yes, how did you make your customers upgrade?
So, all right, two questions. One is, did we migrate from an older version of Drupal to Drupal 8? And second is, how did we convince our customers that it's worthwhile to do that? Okay, the answer is yes and yes, of course. We did migrate. And how did we convince? We basically showed a real demo, the demo that I could not show you to them. And there's something in it for everybody, the managers and the content editors and the users of the system, as well as developers when they see that, especially those developers who are involved in configuration management and stuff like that. So just showing what it has to offer. Also, another thing that is a big plus in Drupal 8's favor is the semantic versioning, where there are 3-digit versioning, like 8.3.37, let's say, right? So the minor version and the patch version, those things, basically, you get new features with every minor version. And patch versions don't give features, but they fix bugs and everything. So with that, we were able to convince clients that, listen, Drupal 8 is going to have a very long shelf life compared to Drupal 7, where improvements in core were very, very hard to come by, because they were not going to add any new functionality in core, and they will only fix bugs. But in Drupal 8, with every new minor version, so from 8.3 to 8.4, for example, media is now in core, right? And so on and so forth. So kind of real improvements coming with every minor version. And the second thing is minor version upgrades are, so far, I've seen them pretty painless. Right? They're not totally uneventful like they used to be in Drupal 7, where 7.37 to 7.38, you wouldn't even notice, you just do that. But in Drupal 8, there will be more update hooks running from minor to minor versions. So yes, so you do have to be very careful. Sometimes things, other contrib modules will break going from one minor version to the next. But overall, I haven't seen anything major, anything scary. So yes, telling them that Drupal 8 will have a longer shelf life, longer lifespan helps. And then showing them the way things are done. Drupal 8 does require more resources, but that's very, resources are cheap. Memory and everything is cheap, so. One problem that we do face is, what about all the code, the custom code that we have written? We're going to have to rewrite it. You don't have to rewrite it. You do have to refactor it, because now you're splitting it up into multiple files. You know, you're writing plugins. So yes, the business logic will still be reused, yes, but now instead of being a standalone function, it's going to be a method of a class, and so on and so forth. So yeah, you do have to restructure, refactor your code pretty heavily, and you have to learn new stuff.
And probably you solve some problems just through restructuring.
Through what?
Probably solve some problems
Yes. Yes.
through restructuring.
Yes. And in fact, sometimes you get surprises like performance improvement, because you are no longer loading one big huge file on every HTTP request, because you factored it out into its own class, which it never touches. So those kinds of things happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks.